Time for the next round of Disney characters, seeing if they can make it through a Kingdom Hearts game without Sora. Now, Kingdom Hearts 2 is a much tougher obstacle course than Kingdom Hearts 1. The enemies are bigger, badder, and much stronger. So to make it through, everyone's gonna have to bring their A game, and that may not even be enough for some teams, but let's deep dive into this analysis. But before we dive in, let me quickly run through the rules if you're just now tuning in and didn't catch the last video that touched on this for Kingdom Hearts 1, that you should definitely check out. I'm going to take Disney characters from the worlds of a particular Kingdom Hearts game, in this case Kingdom Hearts 2, and going purely off of their movie canon only, we'll see if they can clear Kingdom Hearts 2. So just remember to keep that in mind. We won't be using their in-game Kingdom Hearts 2 abilities and feats, nor will we be discussing television shows or other video games. That means some characters are going to be nerfed, but some characters are going to be stronger than they are in Kingdom Hearts, and I will be using each Disney character at the height of their power during their film. Take Hercules as an example. At the height of his power was when he achieved becoming a god in his film, so that's what I'm using as the basis for his strength when discussing him. It doesn't matter that he gave up his godhood at the end of the film, because that's not when he's at the pinnacle of his strength. And don't worry, as the main characters won't be going it alone on this adventure. Kingdom Hearts 2 has a party system of 3 characters on screen at one time, so each MC will have 2 members join them on their journey from their respective films. And we aren't worried about the why or how these characters travel or deal with story elements. It's simply a gauntlet challenge to see which teams could make it to the end of the game successfully. And finally, I realize not all characters will be able to transform or breathe underwater, so Atlantica is a mulligan world. With the rules laid out, let's get this started. Last time I started with Hercules, and history will repeat itself again. Now this team is different than the one I previously used in my first video. This time, Herc's gonna need to bring the thunder in order to take down Organization 13, so it's only natural that we bring Big Daddy Zeus along with his son on this journey, and Pegasus is back in action. So, as I said earlier, Hercules will be in his god form. Couple this with the fact that he has insane strength and now he's basically invulnerable, he can stomp through many of Kingdom Hearts 2's worlds. Pegasus gives Hercules the ability to fly and slash away at hard-to-reach foes with his sword. Zeus, while we don't see him throw hands in the film, we see him throw his lightning bolts at enemies and even blew off the heads of the Rock Titan. So we know getting hit by those are lethal, at least when he wants to kill you. Now, the Land of Dragons on the first visit is easy for this team because honestly, what are the Heartless and Shan Yu going to do to literal gods? Herc alone could solo this world. The first visit to every world in Kingdom Hearts 2 is an easy clear for them, as foes like Barbossa, Scar, Oogie, and Pete, and the various Heartless wouldn't be an issue for them. Even Demyx, who they would face in the underworld, would be easy to defeat, as Zeus's lightning could easily destroy the water enemies Demyx spawns. And just a quick FYI, if you don't destroy all the clones in time, you lose and you have to do the battle over again. This is more of a gameplay thing to make Demyx a little harder. I don't think that you actually die when the timer hits 0. So we're just going to be ignoring that. Now, before you start doing the second visits to other worlds, you do visit Hollow Bastion and go into Tron's world. They might be terrible at riding the light cycle, but the enemies can be dealt with. There is an argument that would their immortality carry over into the Space Paranoids world, or would them being de-resed in the computer somehow override that and they are deleted? I'll let you guys ponder on that one, but I think regardless, they wouldn't get de-resed anyway. Now for the real organization fight with Demyx. Also, fun tidbit, when I was a kid, I couldn't pronounce his name and called him DMX instead, and I didn't even know DMX was a real person. Well, Demyx is royally screwed because just like when they fought sort of in the underworld, Zeus's lightning plus water isn't a good mix for him at all. While Herc lets his dad handle the water enemies, Hercules could just start flinging Demyx around the stage like a ragdoll until they defeat him. The 1000 Heartless battle would be a cinch for these guys as well. And as I stated earlier, so would the second visit to the Disney worlds. While the introduction of the nobodies does make this a bit harder, none of them could lethally damage Herc or Zeus, and both of them are capable of protecting Pegasus. Now we still do have to address the next organization fight with Zaldin. This fight wouldn't faze them as well, as the only one in real danger would be Pegasus, who could just fly out of the way of his attacks. And Zaldin wouldn't even be able to take out Pegasus with both Herc and his father father frontlining against him. To put it simply, Xaldin doesn't have anything in his arsenal that could kill these two. Even if you wanted to argue that he had some superior speed, he's going to run out of stamina before these two do. Now, the second visit to Olympus against Hades, and do I even need to cover this? They would defeat Hades easily. I mean, Herc's already one-shotted Hades in the movie, he just do it again here, and Hades is afraid of Zeus without his Titan army, and even begs Hercules to smooth things over with him. So Hades already knows that without his Titan army, he'd lose in a fight to Zeus. The next big battle on second visits that we should cover is Agrabah against Jafar. Now, in my last video, some brought up the fact that 1v1 fights shouldn't have the other two party members getting involved, and this boss battle would be one of them. While we do see that Carpet could carry Sora, Donald, and Goofy in KH1, I never got why they weren't with Sora on Carpet for this boss battle. As for how this could make sense, either Herc or Zeus could solo ride Carpet and the other could ride on Pegasus. And with the two splitting up attacking Jafar's head and stomach, they could defeat him. But if we did want to keep the fight solo, Hercules could still do it by himself on Carpet. It would just take a little longer. Now it's time to head for the world that never was. The big boss battles here are going to be Xigbar, Luxord, Cyax, and Xemnas. While Roxas does have a great boss battle in this world as well, he didn't fight without a purpose, and his purpose was to see what made Sora so strong. I don't think Roxas would just be an obstacle for any of the good guys coming here, so I don't think I should pit Herc's team or any of the other teams against him. Again, I'll leave it up to you guys in the comments if you want to tell me how you think the fight with Roxas would go, or if you agree that they wouldn't fight at all. So Xigbar is up first. While Xigbar is fast, he does have to stop to reload, and his shots can be deflected back at him. And just like the organization members before him who fought this team, he has no meaningful way to slow them down or even kill them. While they have plenty of ways to both deflect his attacks and attack him. Heck, if Xigbar were to retreat up to his sniping post, Zeus could just hurl lightning bolts at him to severely wound and damage him. As for Luxord, I doubt he has the power capable to lock away Zeus from this fight, but for argument's sake, we'll make this a 1v1 with Hercules. If Luxord could transform Herc into a little dice block, I think it would be really funny watching him freak out about an immortal dice block, as its glowing aura of doom constantly attacks him. But as I've said, Luxord doesn't have anything that can kill Hercules, so this should be a win for him. Same goes for Cyax and Xemnas in the 1v1 battle and the group battle. And I've already addressed this, but if you want to argue how fast organization members are, at some point they are going to get tired, and we've seen this happen when they fought, while Zeus and Herc in his god form won't. So good job, Team Herc, you guys made it through. Now it's Team Mulan up next. For this team, we've got Mulan, Shang, and Chin-Po. Now, when creating this team, you'd think I'd put Mushu or the cow on her team, but considering how difficult KH2's enemies can be, they wouldn't bring much to the table, especially because Mushu in KH2 is stronger than Mushu in the movie. I said movie, not movies, because the less we acknowledge this, the better. And Chin-Po is probably the best out of picking among these three, since, well, you know, he literally hard carried Mulan, Shang, and the cow all to safety without breaking a sweat. He's a physical menace under all that charm. So first up is their own world. I think these three are adept enough at combat that none of the starting Heartless would be that big of a deal for them to defeat. As for Shan Yu, he's stronger in Kingdom Hearts 2 than in the film, so Mulan may not be able to get his sword away from him this time. I think Chin-Po could clash with Shan Yu and fend him off for a while the other two circle around and attack him. And both Shang and Mulan would be agile enough to dodge Shan Yu if he were to run at them instead of wasting time clashing with Chin-Po. So the team passes the first world. Next up, they're going to Beast Castle. Again, the smaller Heartless shouldn't be a problem, including the Thresholder boss fight should be doable for the team. When it comes to dodging its attacks and counterattacking, they should be efficient at it, since all their training prepared them for stuff like that. As for the Dark Thorn, that's a different story. I think some of the techniques like using the chandelier to attack could be done with this team, especially because Mulan thinks outside the box on how to defeat an enemy. And even if she didn't have the strength to spin it, Chin-Po does. And with their military training, they should be able to analyze their surroundings fast enough to know when and where to dodge the attacks coming in. So Team Mulan takes this boss down. As for Olympus, this is when the team might start struggling more with enemies. The Heartless are more annoying in this world, but I do think they can defeat them. As for running away from Hades, I don't know how they can handle a god's fireball if it hit them. None of these three are magically adept at anything, and their armor wouldn't stop Hades from killing them with his fire. But let's say they don't get hit at all and make it out. Next is Cerberus, and if you saw my last video, some of the teams couldn't get past him. And I think this is the case here. Mulan, Shang, and Chinpo are only human with no amazing strength or speed feats. While an enemy like Darkthorn is big, there are ways to damage him inside of the ballroom that these three would definitely take advantage of. Again, in part to their military training, identifying a field of battle and making it work for you. Here it's just a blank room, and nowhere to hide or block Cerberus's incoming attacks. Even if these three decided to go for a head, none of them have the strength to clash with an individual Cerberus head. Chinpo may be able to, and that's me being generous, but the other two heads would rip him in half since Mulan and Shang can't fend them off. If the three of them created distance and tried to come up with a plan on the fly, unlike KH1, Cerberus doesn't just sit there. He now jumps through the air and causes a shockwave when he lands that damages you. And Cerberus has better homing fireballs now that follow you as you try to run. Even if they tried to blind him by throwing their swords at his eyes, he's got 6 eyes total and they have 3 swords, which he could easily snap with his teeth. Not to mention they could just outright miss him. As much as I like Team Mulan, I don't see them making it past Cerberus, so it's over for them, unfortunately. So next up is Team Beast, and I'm well aware since my last video that the Beast doesn't have many great allies to bring with him on this adventure. So let me address bringing Gaston as it may be brought up. There is no way in hell Gaston would ever agree to go along with the Beast. Doctor Strange can't even find a timeline where that happens. Also, Gaston died, and I'm not using Mufasa in this either since he died. Belle could come along with him now since she's not captured by Maleficent over, say, Cogsworth, but she doesn't bring much to the table in terms of a fight, unless you're playing Lorcana, and we aren't doing that here. I still think Cogsworth and Lumiere might be the best bet. At least Lumiere has fire and Cogsworth can be thrown at enemies. As for what they clear, Land of Dragons is doable, and so is his own castle, although there is the part where Beast goes haywire and you need to fight him. So not sure how that would work here, but we're gonna ignore that. Darkthorn could be defeated as Beast knows his castle better than anybody. Now, if we want to say the Beast never gets hit by Hades and makes it to the Cerberus boss fight successfully, kind of like the last time I discussed this, I don't think he can clear Cerberus. Now, let me explain why this is. The Beast is strong. I mean, he pulled Tim Curry out of the wall, but he's not able to fend off Cerberus. This thing takes on people like Hercules, and yeah, Hercules beats it, but Beast isn't on par with Hercules. And if the Beast were to face Cerberus head on, he would clash with one head and be able to fend it off, but the other two would tear into him. Remember, Beast nearly died protecting Belle from a pack of wolves, and if Belle didn't nurse him back to health, he probably would have succumbed to his wounds and died. Cerberus is much worse than a pack of wolves. Sure, there's only one of him, but he's got ridiculous strength and can shoot fireballs. Even if the Beast got on his back to attack his head, Cerberus could jump and spin to shake him off, and the fireballs would track Beast and get him off. And just like I said with the pack of wolves, the Beast isn't super durable either. A dagger wound also nearly killed him, and I know it was a sneak attack, but my point is that if a dagger can pierce the Beast's hide, Cerberus's teeth would chew through his body like paper. Even if I did let Gaston come with him, it wouldn't change that they would lose to Cerberus. Gaston would just be the first one to die, because nobody dies like Gaston. So sadly, the Beast team doesn't clear. Next up is Team Pirates. This team will consist of Jack Sparrow, Will Turner, and Elizabeth Swann. Now, this franchise has a ton of movies where certain characters get stronger in different films, so I'm going to be using their strongest forms through each sequel as well. With Jack, he'll have his undead form from keeping the medallion. Will is going to be at the point when he's the captain of the Flying Dutchman, and Elizabeth will be at peak swordsmanship by the end of the 3rd film. I did really want to use Barbossa because Jack and him are frenemies, but since Barbossa is a boss in Kingdom Hearts 2, I couldn't do it. As for Will, I'm well aware of the Dutchman's curse, so we're just gonna say this is when he can set foot on land. Now, these three easily beat the Land of Dragons and have an advantage because they would have flintlock pistols. and Shan Yu, not knowing what those are, would be caught off guard, and with Jack's aim, he'd kill him with a shot through his heart. As for the Beast Castle, all three are great swordsmen and could beat the Heartless, including Darkthorn. And if anybody could use that environment to their advantage to pull off wacky attacks, it's Jack Sparrow. As for Olympus, excluding Elizabeth, both Jack and Will can't die. Sure, Will could die if you brought his heart with him, but he wouldn't, so getting through the Hades fight would be okay. As for the Cerberus fight, while two of the three are unable to die, they don't have the strength Zeus and Herc have to take down Cerberus. At least when it comes to conventional means, but Jack has insane ideas. Jack could let Cerberus eat him and then carve him up from the inside, spilling his guts. Will could also do this. Neither of them could be killed by Cerberus, and let's just hope Cerberus isn't big on chewing. Again, not that it would kill them, but it would be very painful. As for the Demyx fight in Olympus, I'm not sure how to go about this one. If the timer reaches 0, you lose, but you don't die, so it's just a gameplay thing, like I said. If we ignore that, I'm sure they could defeat all the water enemies just fine. As for the Hydra, both Phil and Pegasus could still help them because they're just part of the level and not in the actual party. So with that in mind, they could still stun and attack the Hydra heads out of reach and defeat it as well. Clearing their own world is absolutely fine, especially because both Will and Elizabeth are much more buffed than they were in the first film. Agrabah's first visit is simple. The enemies and bosses there aren't that threatening even with the fire and ice magic. If they just keep up the frontal assault and don't give them a chance to do much, which they absolutely could, they would make it through. Halloween and Christmas Town are also easy clears as well. There's not much Oogie Boogie could do to actually kill them. And the same goes for Scar. Sure, he's quite fast in his dark form, but he can still be impaled and shot, and his attacks couldn't create enough damage to kill Will or Jack. And Will should be able to body block for Elizabeth. I'd love to see their faces when they go into space paranoids, but after they get over the initial reaction to being there, they could also clear that as the Heartless enemies are nothing special. Defeating Demyx for real this time should also be okay. His water attacks aren't going to do much to them, and when they close the gap, even Demyx himself says he's not a capable fighter while they are. As for the 1000 Heartless, this definitely might get them tired, but if they are carrying explosive bombs, that could help clear them a little faster. Now for the second round visits. It's much tougher in the Land of Dragons, and many of the nobody enemies attack extremely fast, and while both Will and Jack can take a hit and be okay, Elizabeth can't. The sniper nobodies they would encounter may very well kill her. Will would constantly need to keep her safe, but there's a good chance she'd still die, since they can port behind Will and shoot her at a distance. As for the boss battle, if they use the wind the boss creates to shoot themselves up, they should be able to take it down. Now the hard fight with Xaldin. If Elizabeth didn't die during their battle with the snipers, she will here. Xaldin is faster than any enemy they've ever fought before, and Elizabeth isn't durable. And with Xaldin's weapons, he could pierce through Will and just stab through him and kill her. So she definitely doesn't survive this. As for Will and Jack, Xaldin has very powerful hard-hitting attacks. And yes, we've established not being able to die is a huge plus for them, but Xaldin outclasses them in every other area of combat, and has the power to literally blow them away. While Jack and Will may be undead, we've seen that you can still dismember and blow up the cursed pirates. Xaldin could neutralize Jack by simply cutting off his limbs and blowing them miles apart. And now it's just Will, and Will could have the same done to him. Will doesn't have the speed to catch Xaldin, but unlike Herc, he doesn't have the strength to defeat him either. He'd lose the same as Jack, and while they may not be dead, they can't fight back. And even worse for them, after dismembering them, Xaldin could toss their limbless bodies into another world and keep their limbs at Beast Castle. This way they can't even pull themselves back together. So this team can't clear Kingdom Hearts 2. Next up is Simba, Nala, and Rafiki. Simba and Nala will be their older versions for this, and what can I say, they're lions and will attack like normal lions. Rafiki is a bit of a wild card as he's kind of a shaman type character and very in tune with the natural world, but is also a martial arts expert from the little we see of him fight in the movie. Starting off in the Land of Dragons, the Heartless aren't an issue, since they're a very low combat level and Shan Yu could be dangerous for them if he impaled one of them, but Rafiki could more than likely disarm him, making it easy for Simba and Nala to maul him to death. If you look carefully at the fight scene with Rafiki, he isn't even looking at the hyenas behind him, but he knows when to dodge, and that could be again with him being very spiritual, and can use heightened senses to dodge and evade, which would make it difficult for Shan Yu to combat. Beast Castle should also be an easy clear. The biggest issue would be the Darkthorn again, but with Rafiki constantly constantly climbing and hitting him all over his body, it keeps Darkthorn occupied with him while Simba and Nala can bite and claw him to death. Again, the biggest wall for most of these characters is going to be Cerberus. Simba and Nala are just normal lions, and while lions can be deadly to people, it's not as intimidating to a large mythological three-headed underworld guard dog. I have no doubt that Rafiki could hard carry this fight by constantly jumping and weaving between the heads, poking Cerberus in the eyes without being hit, but Rafiki just doesn't have the power to put Cerberus down for good. It's possible that if Rafiki can ensure Simba and Nala are never targeted and Cerberus is constantly only going for him, they could eventually tire him out and win. But let's say they do win that fight, and I'm not saying 100% for sure they would. The Hydra is a big problem for them. Even with Phil and Pegasus's help, I can't see how they would be able to get past the Hydra. The Hydra, on top of the slam attacks it does with its heads, also spawns these flame attacks right on top of people, and Rafiki can't save Simba or Nala from that. And while Cerberus could have been distracted, there are so many Hydra heads that it's impossible for Rafiki to keep them all on him. So I think this is where the team taps out. Team Mermaid is back and free from their underwater singing minigame Prison. Like last time, it'll be Ariel, Eric, and Triton. With Triton being able to turn himself and Ariel human when they need to be on land. Since we do see in the films he has the power to turn Ariel into a human. And you guys left comments on my last video that gave me some good input for this team that I'll bring up later. So Land of Dragons is an easy clear with Triton hard carrying them, as he can create these beams that cause mass destruction and could obliterate Shan Yu. Beast Castle is also a clear for the same reasons. Olympus can also be cleared by using the same wind conditions. Triton could just pretend he's playing Space Invaders and constantly destroy all the enemies in his way. And for the bigger enemies, he could grow bigger himself. Now, last time I never gave him this ability because he never uses it in the movie. But as you guys pointed out, Ursula could do it with the trident, so even though it wasn't shown that it was him doing it, Triton should be capable of doing so as well. When Triton transforms into Big Fish on campus, he could hold down the enemies and have a giant kaiju battle with them. With this in mind, Triton is carrying this team through all the first world visits. As for the battle with Demyx, I don't think the King of the Sea is losing to a guy who uses water to attack. And as for the 1000 Heartless battle, he could simply blast his way through while Eric keeps Ariel safe from anything that manages to sneak by Triton. The real issues begin once they hit Zaldin. Just like when we talked about Team Pirates, Eric and Ariel are helpless here. Triton would do his damnedest to protect his daughter, but Zaldin should be able to skewer her and Eric before Triton can stop him. With his daughter dead, I don't think Triton would think logically about the fight anymore and just start firing beams off, even giving into that rage and growing big to try and squish Zaldin. Now on paper that might sound great, but remember, getting bigger doesn't mean he's going to be invincible. Ursula was killed by ramming a ship into her gut, and Zaldin has access to as many spears. If Triton did grow bigger, that means he's now a bigger target and his lethal spots are also easier to hit. That includes his heart. Even if Triton's beams traveled fast enough to hit Zaldin, he still needs to aim them first, they don't just auto-lock. I feel like this could be a toss-up, but I'm leaning more in Zaldin's favor. Zaldin, also using his many wind attacks, could get the trident away from Triton. Even if King Triton didn't grow big and stayed his original size, he's still not fast enough to dodge Zaldin. So it's over yet again by the Zaldin wall. Now it's time for Team Halloween again. As I said in my last video, Jack is my favorite KH party member, but doesn't have the necessary firepower for a lot of fights. He can't use magic since this is the movie version, and yes, I did see a plethora of comments saying, what if Jack had his video game powers? I am aware of that game's existence, and am old enough to remember the commercials on cable TV. But like I said, this is movies only. If I gave Jack his abilities from that game, it wouldn't be fair to any of the other characters. And by popular demand, I will replace a member of the old team now, so it's Jack, Zero, and Dr. Finkelstein. So what does each one bring to the table? Well, Jack is good at scaring people, although I don't know how much you can really scare a Heartless or most of these bosses into submission. He's relatively quick and could dodge some attacks, and being a skeleton, he can't be impaled, which is definitely a plus. Zero is a ghost, and being one, he could probably possess an enemy. As for the Doctor, kind of like Sally, he has a pretty hard time when it comes to fights. I know the Doctor has come up with great inventions, but his best ones that could help a lot are in the Oogie's Revenge game and in Kingdom Hearts 2 when he created that machine. but neither of those are in the movie he's in. And in the actual film, he didn't really create anything that would help out in these fights. I'm sure he could probably create something, but he would only be granted devices he's already used on screen, not brand new ones we've never seen before. Take Megamind, which I used in this video. He was only given inventions he created in the film. I didn't say Megamind was so smart he could invent a heartless go-away ray gun, which I'm sure he could. I'm positive the Doc is smart enough to create something that could help them out, but I'm not going to give him made-up weaponry unless he's been seen using it specifically in A Nightmare Before Christmas. It's tough for this team to realistically clear the Land of Dragons. I'm unsure if a Heartless could be possessed by Zero, but if it could, maybe Zero could possess the Assault Rider Heartless, which would make fighting the regular Heartless a bit easier for Jack. As for Shan Yu, again, this comes down to could Zero possess him and keep him under his control. If he could, then Zero can make Shan Yu take that sword and, well, you get the idea. Beast Castle is a bit of an issue, as the Heartless, literally called the Possessor, is kind of preoccupying space. So could Zero boot it out? Or could Zero possess the Possessor? These are the real questions here, folks. Most of the fights will be determined by if Zero could possess the enemy or bosses they come in contact with. If he can't, it's game over, as Jack and the Doctor have very few offensive capabilities. I think once you hit Olympus, Hades could take out the Doctor, since he wouldn't manage avoiding him very well. Another issue is I don't think Hades could be possessed by spirits, because when we see him actually fall into that underworld sewer system, the spirits try to drag him down, but don't enter his body, so gods may be immune to possession. And Hades would just have to target Jack and leave Zero alone, noticing that every time he destroys a Heartless Zero possesses, Zero just possesses a new one, so he's thinning his own army. Or I should say Pete's army. There's also evidence to show Hades can damage spirits to some degree, as we see him throwing his fire here at spirits in the underworld. He may be able to either exterminate or knock Zero unconscious. He is the god of the underworld after all, and Jack may be nimble, Jack may be quick, but he's not gonna get away from this candlestick. And even though Jack is a skeleton and may be undead, I've already explained how undead characters can still lose. But Jack has it even worse being down in the underworld. Hades, after beating him, could throw him down with the other souls, and we see that the deeper you go, the more you age and decay, and bones can decay. And if Jack did make it away from Hades successfully, he'd still have to fight Cerberus alone, and while Jack did untie Sally and Santa within a few seconds, I don't see why that means he can defeat Cerberus. Sure, Jack could absolutely dodge a lot of Cerberus's attacks, but how does he beat him? Cerberus only needs to land one good hit to either pin Jack down or break his skeleton body up into pieces. And with Cerberus being the watchdog of the underworld, he sees scary stuff all day, every day. I don't think Jack could scare him away. And even if he did, it still wouldn't explain how he physically beats him, or even the Hydra. And while Oogie is intimidated by Jack from what we see in the film, Oogie is on the lower end of powerful bosses these teams would need to fight, as Oogie himself is terrible when it comes to throwing hands. He relies heavily on his traps in the film and in KH lore. The minute he has to physically fight himself, he's terrible at it, which would explain why he can't take Jack in a fist fight and avoids him at all costs. But Oogie being fearful of Jack doesn't mean that other characters would be, as they have the durability, strength, and speed Oogie severely lacks in. But if you think Jack could still win without something I may not have covered in the video, let me know, because I'd be happy to see him get farther. Next up is Team Al. Just like last time, Genie is front and center as the hard carry for this team, as we've seen him move at ridiculously high speeds, bend reality, transform himself and others into various things, and has the added benefit of being free with no lamp that can be destroyed, thus killing him. And while that may lower his power a bit, he himself states that he still has semi-phenomenal cosmic power, which isn't that much of a downgrade in terms of what they need to clear here. I went over this last time, but Genie could simply dismantle many enemies with his magic, or just teleport them into areas where they can die without worrying about them, like dropping them into an ocean to drown them. So the first few worlds would be a breeze. As for Aladdin and Carpet, Aladdin does have knowledge about fighting and he's very acrobatic, and coupled with Carpet flying him around, he would be hard to hit. So the first visit on each world wouldn't be difficult for them to achieve, as nobody has any real answer to stop Genie from beating them. This also applies to the Demyx fight as well. Now when we get to somebody like Zaldin, who's been a huge hurdle for a lot of teams to clear, I've stated how even if there is one party member hard carrying, they usually can't protect the weaker members due to Zaldin's speed. However, that's not the case for Genie. We've seen on screen just how fast the genie can be, and he saved Aladdin multiple times just before being killed. Genie, on top of moving extremely fast, can poof and teleport all over the place and create whole armies of himself to keep Aladdin and Carpet safe. Then the fight becomes 1,000 Genie clones versus Zaldin. And to make it even better, we've seen evidence that Genie can buff Aladdin when he needs to. Genie could increase Aladdin's strength and speed, so Aladdin would be able to keep up in these fights. Not that Genie would need the help, honestly. Heck, Genie also has access to pop culture references from our time period. He could give Aladdin Iron Man's suit if he wanted to. Clearing all the worlds would be a breeze for the Genie, and with him buffing Aladdin and the Carpet as well, and creating his own personal army of a semi-cosmic fighting force that control enemies into submission or just end them, none of the foes in KH2 could stop him. Even the high-end enemies like Xigbar, Syx, and Xemnas wouldn't be able to stop him. The only thing that could probably stop this team is when Aladdin has to duel Xemnas in the one-on-one fight before the group fight. And that's if Genie couldn't just poof himself into that fight as well, because I doubt Xemnas could keep him out of it. But I did address that Genie would have already buffed Aladdin to be able to keep up with an organization member in speed and power if Aladdin did have to go it solo for that fight. Not to mention that Xemnas isn't at full power during that fight either. When it does get to the group fight, I imagine Genie placing a whoopee cushion under the seat of Xemnas' throne when they fight him, only for Genie to lose his mind laughing and Xemnas being severely pissed off at the lack of seriousness going on. So Team Al should be able to make it through Kingdom Hearts 2. Now, I've made a bonus team since some of these characters don't have their own world, and I paired them with someone who probably couldn't leave their world without some magic shenanigans. And that team is Merlin, Tron, and Stitch. I couldn't leave out these characters, so I threw them together to create Team Makeshift. And by the way, I had so much fun making this one, so for the next video, I'm letting you guys decide Team Makeshift. Just make sure you're subscribed to be considered and create a team of 3 characters and comment below who you want it to be. The most characters' names I see from subs will form a team for the next video. Now, Merlin obviously has some wild magic techniques he can use here, like bringing inanimate objects to life to do things he commands. He can also transform into a wide variety of animals, real and mythical, and can move fast enough that we see him blast off to Bermuda. As for Tron, he's got his little disc of doom that can do heavy damage when it connects with someone. He could also analyze enemy weaknesses and openings. And Experiment 626, otherwise known as Stitch, can lift 3,000 times his own weight, can outthink a supercomputer, and can steal everyone's left shoe. Now, throwing these 3 into the Land of Dragons is pretty wild. Stitch could basically solo Shan Yu. He's physically stronger than him and could forcibly take his sword away, making him defenseless for the team to annihilate him. That also goes for Beast Castle, which Stitch could easily beat everything in there by himself. Now at Olympus, running away from Hades would be easy for this team. As they get away from Hades and make it to the fight with Cerberus, Stitch could just toss him around. I couldn't find an accurate weight for Cerberus or the Hydra, but even if Stitch couldn't toss them around, Merlin could carry these fights instead. For those who might not remember, Merlin is an expert at biological warfare. He can transform himself into a disease and infect Cerberus and the Hydra and cause them to die from it. We see that Merlin does this to Madame Mim when they fight, and he uses it on her dragon form, which makes it so that those sicknesses he uses do in fact work on mythological creatures. Because when Mim and Merlin transformed into those animals, they did also get their biological elements from transforming. It wasn't just skin deep, as we see Mim could breathe fire, and their weights for the different animals were also accurate. As for Disney Castle, the Caribbean, Agrabah, Halloween Town, and Pride Rock, Stitch is stronger than anything in those worlds and durable enough to take shots from any of those enemies, while Merlin and Tron provide backup for him. As for the Demyx fight, the water would definitely annoy Stitch, but it's not like he could drown. And Stitch could toss Demyx around like a rag doll. As for the 1000 Heartless battle, Merlin could also use the furniture in his bag that he carries with him to bring to life and create his own little army of feng shui. And obviously Stitch and Tron could take out a lot of enemies as well. As for the second round of visits, all goes well. Again, the real challenge is Zaldin. Now if Stitch could grab and hold on to Zaldin, it's over, as he can basically just Hulk slam him over and over until Zaldin dies, while Merlin and Tron help stomp him. I'm not sure how fast the plasma bullets Stitch dodges in his movie are, but he seems to be fine fine and not get hit by any, so it's implied he's very quick. Also, if Merlin could speed up Stitch with his magic, I think Stitch should be fast enough to catch Zaldin. Merlin could also keep Tron and himself safe by turning into dragons to help put pressure on Zaldin. We know Merlin can do this because he has turned himself and Arthur into different animals during the film. And Mim makes Merlin promise before the wizard duel not to turn into any mythical creatures like dragons, which she then ends up breaking. And Mim wouldn't make Merlin promise that unless he could transform into a dragon. So they should be able to take Zaldin down in a fight if things fall into place. The rest of the secondary world visits should go fine, as the Heartless and Nobody enemies should go down with Stitch's strength, Tron's analyzing of weaknesses, and Merlin's magic. As for the world that never was, when they get to facing Xigbar, again this will fall on Stitch to damage him, as Stitch does have access to projectiles as well with his guns, and Xigbar leaves himself open when he reloads. Tron also has projectiles that can help out Stitch in this case. Tron could also analyze Xigbar's ammo capacity so they know preemptively when they can strike. Merlin would be a big help when Xigbar goes for his strongest move because he could turn everyone into extremely small organisms. Just like when he becomes a disease against Mim, and while making nobody sick probably doesn't work, they could still avoid that attack by being so small Xigbar couldn't actually hit them. Again, if they need the extra power, Merlin can transform himself and Tron into a mythical creature that could help Stitch on offense, while Stitch pummels Xigbar every time he needs to reload. The fight should be winnable, though albeit it will be a long one. Luxord is a bit of a wild card. The issue with Luxord is while the other teams have their designated hero to 1v1, Team Makeshift doesn't really have one. If either Merlin or Stitch have to fight Luxord, they'll be fine. Tron may have issues. Although with Tron's computer programming and logic, he may be able to properly deduce where Luxord is and calculate probabilities that make it easier for him to catch him. Luxord should lose to both Stitch and Merlin, but Tron seems like a gamble who might win. And that's if we ignore that Merlin could probably outdo Luxord's magic with his own and just make him and Stitch part of the fight. Now, Sykes is a monster with his speed and strength, and could very well defeat this team. The only thing that may give this team a chance is how Sykes chooses to use his speed and strength. Sykes' fighting style is very run at you and bash your head in. He isn't constantly trying to get behind you or sneak attack. If he did brute force his way at the team, Stitch should be able to hold him in place and stop him from moving. And just like Sora, if Sykes threw his weapon at them, Stitch could catch it and then beat him with it. Remember, Stitch is incredibly physically strong and durable. He's tanked explosions and beatings before. And he managed to stop a gasoline truck when it was coming right at him. And he threw Gantu around like it was nothing. He realistically should be able to hold Sykes in place for Merlin and Tron to attack him. Again, this is purely because of how Sykes chooses to fight. If Sykes decided to change how he fights, he may be able to win instead. But judging purely off the boss fight in Kingdom Hearts 2 and how he's designed to fight, they should win. Xemnas is another story entirely. Firstly, in the 1v1, Tron and Merlin cannot win that by themselves. As for Stitch, I think this is where he taps out as well. While Stitch is incredibly strong, Xemnas' speed is much better than any of the previous organization members, and has way more tricks up his sleeve, like creating barriers, creating clones, lightsaber hands, projectile attacks, and can place a spell that gradually does damage on you over time. With Merlin unable to use his magic to help Stitch, I don't think Stitch could win this. Even if we skipped the 1v1 fight and went straight into the group fight, Tron won't be able to do much, and Xemnas has so many attacks to keep Merlin from spell casting during the fights, he'll render both of them pretty much useless. He could also trap one of them, preferably Stitch, while his clone copies barrage Merlin and Tron. And unlike Sykes, Xemnas doesn't just face tank everything while running at you. He always looks for openings and goes for blind spots. And if you were to trap Merlin instead of Stitch, he could do what Xigbar couldn't and barrage the other two with projectiles until they died. Sadly, Xemnas is just too strong for this team to defeat. Now with all the teams completed, it looks like Team Herc and Al are the winners of completing Kingdom Hearts 2. Just like last time, these two seem to be the only ones that can make it through just because of the incredible party members they have attached to them. This was a tough one for these characters to get through though. Kingdom Hearts 2 has much more powerful foes for our heroes to face, and the power gap is really getting bigger here. Even with our winners, some had to get really creative or outright broken to make it through to the end. While some Disney characters may have been held back simply because they lacked enough power, speed, and durability, other reasons could have been just not having the right teammates to really form a cohesive and strong team. While other Disney heroes were lucky enough to be friends with extremely powerful characters. But what do you guys think about who made it and who didn't? Did you disagree with some of the teams who did or didn't make it? Or do you agree with some of these hypotheses? And let me know if you want me to jump straight into KH3 or do some of the other games first like Birth by Sleep or backtrack to Chain of Memories. I personally didn't do Chain of Memories simply because there were no new teams and the only new content would have been fighting some of the organization members. But let me know if you still want to see that. Thanks again for watching, and this was me just nathing out. Welcome to the end of the video, but it doesn't have to be the end. If you want to watch more videos of me nathing out over Kingdom Hearts or a plethora of other games, just click here. And thanks for watching. This was my longest video to date, and I'm looking forward to doing more Kingdom Hearts stuff in the near future, so hope to see you there.